Hello, good evening, and welcome back. EU officials, no basis for meaningful UK Brexit talks, from the BBC News 46 minutes ago. EU officials have said there is currently no basis for meaningful discussions with the UK over Brexit. And as far as I'm concerned, this could still very well be a good thing, because of course the EU is trying to play Project Fear in saying that any country that tries to leave the European Union will suffer terribly, not only at the EU's hands, but then when they're out on their own as well. And therefore they're trying to make an example of the UK as it being a terrible prospect to leave the EU, as they don't want anybody else to leave. Otherwise their empire will crumble, as it inevitably will. They get too big that they can't fail. And then they fail. So, diplomats from the other EU member states have been told the UK will leave without a deal unless major changes are made to Theresa May's deal, but that these changes, such as abolishing the Irish backstop, were unacceptable. As we will get on to, one negotiator said, "We are back where we were 3 years ago." Yeah, that tends to be what happens in a democracy. It's slow for a reason. It's supposed to be slow so that you can't have a radical come into power and suddenly change things. But that does mean that you can't change things. Downing Street said, "I hope the EU would rethink its refusal of changes." Good luck. A spokesperson said the EU needed to change its stance, adding, "We will throw ourselves into the negotiations with the greatest energy and the spirit of friendship, and we hope the EU will rethink its current refusal to make any changes to Mrs May's withdrawal agreement." And that the plan negotiated between the EU and Mrs May was voted down by MPs 3 times. Yes, as it was supposed to be called a Pyrrhic victory if it had gone through. It's very damaging, and that's why it's voted down. And then the Speaker of the House kept denying it to be aired because it's, well, it's too similar to one that's already been voted down, so we're not going to put it forward at all. New Prime Minister Boris Johnson pledged to do or die, leave the EU by the deadline of Halloween, with or without a deal. Well, Halloween is perfect then. But they're talking about the backstop element of the hard border. So, BBC Brussels reporter Adam Fleming said the meeting between the officials and diplomats was a debrief from discussions last week between the UK Brexit Secretary Steve Barclay and Mr Johnson's European envoy David Frost. Mr Frost reiterated the Prime Minister's stance that the backstop element of Mrs May's plan, which aims to prevent a hard border returning between Ireland and Northern Ireland, had to be scrapped. Yes, and a simple way to stop this, surely, is to just tell the IRA, any members who are still existing and still who are feeling quite vitriolic, to just say, well, if you're concerned about the unification of your country, or it being broken apart, and not being unified, well, the EU want to do this because we don't, so you know where to find them. Do what you will. And I'm pretty sure it would fix itself very quickly if that were to happen, because it's often the case, as it was saw to a horrific example in the First World War, where the generals didn't really know what the frontline troops were facing, and therefore just went, yeah, sure, go for it. Like saying it's not sportsmanlike. Was it to have more than 2 machine guns? I believe it was. Yeah, but war isn't sportsmanlike. Sure, you got the Geneva Convention latterly to say that, no, all is not fair in love and war. Now it's only all fair is in love. So, that would be a simple way to stop it, essentially. But EU are going to try and rub it in as much as they can, obviously. The backstop agreed by Mrs May in November 2018 would see Northern Ireland staying aligned to some rules of the EU single market. Yes, but you could easily fix this the same as countries which have different agreements, like go to Switzerland, for example, which is landlocked, to say, hey, or any bordering, if you go as far as Turkey, for example, and those borders, to say, well, okay, if you're not in the EU, how hard do our borders have to be then? Mr Frost said Mr Johnson's new ministers were not bound by commitments made by the previous government. And I think that's a great point, because it's been made clear that you can't make rules that then the next governments would have to follow and they can't overturn, because that is of course how tyrants and dictators get their way. They put something in place that can never be overturned, and that was a similar way that Islam has done, to say, well, Muhammad is the final prophet, there will not be any prophets after him. If anybody claims to be one, then they are lying, they are wrong, they are blasphemer, and so on. One of the EU's Brexit negotiators told the meeting that the G7 summit in France at the end of August could mark the point where a no-deal Brexit becomes inevitable. I really don't think it's a bad thing. As long as the businesses know what to expect, that it's going to be a no deal, then that's fine. They'll make adjustments accordingly. I mean, seeing as they make so much more money than the politicians, they're obviously going to be doing business. They're always going to be one step ahead. They're going to go where the money goes, and if the money was in politics, then they'd be there instead of being savvy businessmen. The good business people normally don't end up in politics. But a diplomat at the meeting told Adam Fleming the comments simply reflected the speech Mr. Johnson gave in comments the day after it became Prime Minister. Yep, cool. So, here's their analysis. They say the EU is not optimistic about any agreement with the UK. Doesn't matter, not an issue. Message they're getting from Boris Johnson's team is that the UK is not going to sign another deal unless it involves getting rid of the backstop. Yes, that makes a lot of sense, and the EU tend to be fearful of Boris Johnson as well, which is about time. As Machiavelli said, it's better to be feared than loved if you can't have both. So the EU has been clear at the time, again, that it isn't going to do that. It's the integral part of any withdrawal agreement that has to stay. They basically just found something that we didn't like in particular and just twisting the knife. So the conclusion of officials is there's no reason to get back around the table at the moment for the simple reason they don't think they can meet the conditions Johnson has set. At the moment, many people think the direction of travel is heading towards a no-deal Brexit. And I look forward to it because then people realise it isn't as bad as they think, and maybe that'll be yet another thing where the so-called experts aren't correct. Because I wouldn't say they're experts so much as just trying to get their own way. It's the same as if someone like Warren Buffett makes a prediction about, where the stock's going to go, that they will go that way because people think that he is correct, in which case he can just make money off it like that, for example. I'm not saying he does, I'm just saying that it's that kind of thing. So they say the meeting follows an interview, and they said Parliament could no longer block the UK from leaving the EU without a deal. Wonderful. In a no-deal scenario, the UK would immediately leave the EU with no agreement about the divorce process and would exit overnight from the single market and customs union. Good, and the EU would struggle trying to get the 39 billion, seeing the amount of debt they're currently in, and realising that you can't have, especially with something like the Eurozone, you can't have such centralised command over such a large area. It just doesn't work. Sure, if you've got like a dozen or two people living on a farm, moving in together, growing different things, and they don't care about money, and people are saying, can you just focus on these things, all good, centralised command, fantastic. But when it gets bigger, that ain't going to work, because they don't know the particulars. Opponents say a no-deal Brexit would damage the economy and lead to border posts between Northern Ireland and the Republic. Other politicians argue any disruption could be quickly overcome. Yes, it could be, and even if there is damage of the economy, we will bounce back. And that's the thing, that you can take our money, but you will never take our freedom. To quote Braveheart. But it's the same essence. I mean, you could say a similar thing then with the Second World War. It's like, this is going to be difficult and things are going to go badly. Yes, but it's still morally right to fight the National Socialists, to fight the Communists. It's still morally right. So it doesn't matter how bad it is in the short term, because we will stay together, we will stick together, our communities will be stronger for it, and we will bounce back stronger, bigger and better than before. No worries at all. So they say Dominic Raab, or Demonic Raab, as Pi calls him, will begin a tour of North America on Tuesday as part of a bid to fire up the UK's trade relationships with countries outside the EU. And I'm sure Trump will be fine, he'll get elected in 2020 as well, and he will extend courtesy out to the UK as long as the Corbyn government doesn't get in. But thankfully that's seeming less and less likely. And similarly, Farage is annoyed that the Tories are saying, hey, could you just leave, otherwise you're splitting the Leave vote? And they're like, no, be better. Yeah, that's a fair point, yep. Maybe change the voting system then. Mr. Raab will be visiting Canada, the US and Mexico. He said the foreign ministers he saw at a meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in Thailand last week expressed a consistent warmth for the UK and a desire to work more closely with us. Well, we are in a great strategic place, and if we take control of our own country, then we can make the most of that like we did before. As we have done with female monarchs, that happens. We had Elizabeth I, Victoria, and now Elizabeth II. And all those times were great. You've got Elizabeth I for the British Empire, Victoria the first, so far, for the Industrial Revolution, following on from the Agricultural Revolution, and now with Queen Elizabeth II, maybe this will be the start of something wonderful. So, here's hoping, here's to making it happen, and have a wonderful day.